The International Monetary Fund says that frequent load shedding is one of the obstacles to conducting business in South Africa. In addition, the institution also quoted unemployment, the quality of education, failures in the transportation system, corruption and governance issues as some of the impediments to the country's economic growth. Now, the IMF says that there's a huge gap between what the government says in its policy statements and implementation, and that, of course, undermines confidence and growth impact. Now, all of this is contained in the IMF's report following the institution's week-long meetings with the South African government, the Reserve Bank, business and interest parties. African Futurist and former South African ambassador to Japan, Mohau Pheko, joins us now virtually to share her perspectives on this recently concluded visit. Ms. Pheko, thanks so much for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you, Sakina. Good morning, and good morning to all the listeners.
So quite a few things that the IMF touches on in the report, the quality of education, unemployment, inequality, governance, but nothing new there. These are all things that have been highlighted and that we are very well aware of as the country. So what is your view on this visit and the subsequent report that was produced?
Listen, I think that Treasury should be quite happy with what the IMF has said because they are in sync. There's nothing new that the IMF has brought to the table in terms of helping us move in a different trajectory in light of the fact that the country is actually in recession. And all the things that the IMF has said, if you look at the Minister of Finance's budget speech earlier this year, this is all a reflection of what is already the vision of Treasury. There's nothing absolutely new that is going to get us out of the situation and crisis, economic crisis and unemployment crisis that we are in. They continue to harp on debt to GDP ratio, yet we have serious infrastructural problems, serious humanitarian problems in this country that we must finance. And we cannot continue with an austerity budget, which is really essentially what the IMF is saying. They are essentially asking us to basically defund the key areas where we need to stimulate the economy and tighten the belt. And the people who are going to suffer are the people living on the margins. It's not a great outlook for South Africa, but we would not have anticipated anything different coming out of the IMF.
So if we look at the debt to GDP ratio, and you say, and it has been said over and over, we cannot continue on this a path of an austerity budget for the government, given all the challenges that we have as a country. So what needs to be done in this regard?
We need to spend. And this is the language that government does not seem to understand. We need to spend money. We need to spend new money. In fact, we need to move away from the fact that there was ever a stimulus package given to us during the COVID crisis. That was money that was reprioritized. We need new money, and there is new money. There is money that the South African Reserve Bank, for example, can lend to government in light of the fact that both the IMF loans and the new Development Bank loans that South Africa has received have holidays. In other words, they have time to pay off these loans within a 3 and a 5-year period. So the South African Reserve Bank, which is sitting on about 900 billion rands of money, can lend government the money new money to stimulate the economy. You see, when you spend money, you're able to increase your incomes. And by so doing, you are then able to stimulate growth. What we are doing now is we are cutting and defunding a number of very key areas. We're defunding healthcare, we're defunding transportation, we are defunding higher education, we're defunding basic education. In the middle of a recession, you have to spend money in order to in order to generate income and stimulate the economy. When we continue to cut spending, we are decreasing the national income of this country, which eventually decreases your GDP. It doesn't make sense. We have to spend.
So if everybody is saying, except for those who are in charge, that we ought to be spending more, Ms. Pheko, why isn't government spending if it is that obvious? Let's look at the role of the Reserve Bank whilst we're at it, and inflation targeting, and what would be the rationale for the money that they are sitting on, as you say, not sitting on, but basically the money that is there to be spent. Why wouldn't we do things differently from the way we have been all along?
The thing is, I think that there is this obsession with debt, that, the country is getting into debt. We have to sit on top of these debts and pay off these debts, despite the fact that you are at a 46% unemployment rate, with 77% of your youth unemployed in this country. Almost 55% of women in this country are unemployed, African women unemployed. And you are sitting on money, that could be spent in order for you to generate money. So austerity is cruel. It's absolutely the most cruel thing that institutions can bring to bear upon our people. We have to move away from this violent model of development. Austerity has failed. It doesn't allow us to move towards an economic development model that will lower unemployment, that will take millions out of poverty. We are also the Reserve Bank is obsessed with inflation, and by that they keep increasing interest rates, making it very difficult even for small businesses to borrow money in order to stimulate your manufacturing sector, etc. So this neoliberal type of thinking is not development friendly in the least at all. We also do not have enough money going into your industrial policy. You've literally defunded that. That financing on industrial financing has decreased almost by 4.1%. You've got the IDC getting almost 0.2% of GDP. What can be done with 11.3 billion when your infrastructure is falling apart, and essentially government wants to outsource that now to the private sector? I don't know how private sector is going to get involved, for example, in a rail system that has completely collapsed. They are also not putting any money into infrastructure programs beyond dumping a lot of money inside ESCOM. There is nothing that's going in for your water, your telecommunications, your transportation. So the mantra, which is also affirmed by the IMF, is that you need structural reforms. That's a curse word. I mean, that's the code word for you must deregulate, you must liberalize trade, you must privatize
So let's talk about the privatization. Let's look at the unbundling of Eskom, number one. We've seen what's happened to South African Airways, for example. And many of these SOEs that find themselves in rather precarious positions and are literally a drain on the fiscus. They may be so, but how important are they to the strategic developmental objective of the country?
They are fundamental. I mean, your rail system, not only in terms of lowering transport costs for people to get to work, it's important for moving goods and services throughout the country and potentially throughout the African continent. Your ports, in order for you to send stuff out and receive goods and services, also need to be upkept. People need water. They cannot live without water. People need electricity, but we cannot continue in the trajectory that we are with Eskom without beginning to look at very seriously renewables as well. This just transition to lowering our emissions. We have to broaden our debate, and in fact, we have to actually go back to demanding a macroeconomic policy discussion in this country. There is none. Not in NEDLEC, not anywhere is there a discussion about what is our macroeconomic policy? What are we going to prioritize as a nation? What are the important things that we need to ensure that we move things forward?
But as things stand, because I think government will vehemently argue that those have been outlined. They will point you, for example, to the National Development Plan and say, you know, we have a clear map, a pathway to where we want to go, how we intend getting there. So if you say that we haven't prioritized, what then are we doing? Where are we going with regard to, fiscal policy and that macroeconomic framework that you refer to?
We have a list of a number of projects which are announced in every state of the nation. We have a budget that is announced each year. There is a de-link between what we need in terms of the projects that need to be funded and what Treasury is willing to fund. Treasury is not funding the National Development Plan. I think we should be very, very clear about that. Also, we are not clear about what projects are a priority and need to be funded, of course, unless we're talking about flagpoles and bailing out SAA to the tune of 10 billion and leaving all the other cherry picking what we want to finance. I mean, the 100 billion infrastructure fund, which the president announced, is simply a pipe dream because Treasury has taken that off the books. It's not being funded. So where are you going to get the money for this? So there is a disjuncture and a complete de-link between your National Development Plan and what National Treasury is prepared to fund.
So just a final question, we're out of time, but all of this, the IMF visit happens at a time when there's this massive scandal around a robbery at the president's game farm. What sort of message does that send, especially when governance issues is one of the matters that they actually flagged?
I think that it really sends a message of a lack of confidence in our governing institutions. It does not send a comfortable message that at one level the IMF is saying that okay, we must get rid of corruption, which they're absolutely correct in saying, but it makes nonsense when there are allegations that your own president may be allegedly involved in money laundering. And he is the chief principal in ensuring that this government combats illegal transactions. It does not send a good picture internationally, especially because we are also obsessed with getting investors to come and invest in South Africa. It does not bode well. The optics look really, really bad at this point, and we have to fundamentally really walk away from a governance system where we are unable to really hold this government accountable for the things that they do. It doesn't send a good message also even to the criminal justice system if at the highest levels of this government we cannot control money laundering and theft and all of these things. It doesn't send a good message at all to the public, because we can say that if it's happening in the highest levels of government, why should anybody else be brought to book for doing the same things?
Ms. Mohau Pheko, thanks so much for your time. African futurist and former South African ambassador to Japan, Mohau Pheko.